Hello, everyone. You are listening to Film Philosophy, where we break down the philosophies, concepts, and structures of filmmaking in the American film industry. We are filmmakers Tiffany Francis, Andrew Coles, and Nzinga Murray. Film Philosophy is brought to you by the Mission Entertainment. Today's episode features Georgina Lightning, and the topic is the depth of Indigenous voices. Georgina is a filmmaker, actor, public speaker, and advocate for change with over 30 years in the film and TV industry. Her films have garnered several awards that include the White House Epic Award and has been invited to many countries and Indigenous communities all over North America to speak as an Indigenous female filmmaker. We chose Georgina for this topic because Georgina is an Indigenous filmmaker who believes story to be the most powerful tool in the world for shaping perception. As an Indigenous storyteller, she is dedicated to the promotion and advancements of Indigenous voices in the film industry. So, welcome, Georgina.
Thank you so much.
Yay. Mm-hmm. Happy to have you.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to get into it. Georgina, can you tell us about your background and how that kind of ties into your commitment to promote Indigenous stories?
Well, I took off from Canada in 1990 with my 3 children as a single mom to further my studies. And I went to the American Academy, 3 years, UCLA, extension programs for the business of, and then IFP, Independent Film Producers, for a bunch of labs, like for directing, producing, all kinds of things. When I was there, I raised my 3 children in the film industry too. I left Canada, I had no clue, but it was a highly traumatizing area for me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that until I was in Los Angeles, and the liberation that I got there, being 2,000 miles away from my home, and just, I found myself there. And so then when I started working as an Indigenous woman, there were no roles for me at all. My children actually got some work because when Jane Fonda pushed Ted Turner to do that Indigenous series, we had like Broken Chain, Lakota Woman, Tecumseh, Geronimo. We had a whole string of shows. So my kids got a lot of credit and a lot of experience on set with that series, but they had no women, you know. It was men and children for some reason. I don't get it. But yeah. So there was really nothing for me to do. I just figured out we have to make our own work, right? And so I started Tribal Alliance Productions. I started learning about what that means to make a film, started really supporting a lot of filmmakers to try to get there. I thought I was supposed to be a facilitator to help people get their film made. So I was helping student filmmakers. I was trying to influence thesis projects with Indigenous content, with Indigenous characters, and blah, blah, blah. So I did a lot of work. I worked with ABC, NBC, like a lot of the diversity departments, affirmative action at Screen Actors Guild. Like I did that for like 10 years. And finally, it's like there was no change. And to this day, I have to say, so 34 years since I went to LA, nothing's changed. So there is not one Indigenous film made by Indigenous people that has been funded by Hollywood. And Hollywood's 120 years old, right? Filmmaking is 120 years old. So not one production. Anything I've ever made, I've had to get private equity, private investors, you know, and I still, if I wanted to continue making films in the US, that's what I have to do. And that's what Indigenous people have to do. So it's a completely different skill set. There's a lot more work that we have to do. You know, we have to work 10 times harder for anything that we want, right?
Absolutely.
But it's important because, you know, I've been a part of other people's visions and other people's stories, and a lot of them have not been Indigenous. I think it's really important for us to tell our narrative because we're still oppressed. We still have major issues. We're still feeling the effects of the continued genocide that is still happening, where our people are in a state of emergency. That my province has declared itself a state of emergency for not just the opioid addiction crisis and the amount of deaths, but children in care. You know, we have more children in care today than we ever had in residential school. So there's a major epidemic. And if we're not participating in stories, how's anybody going to know that? Because nothing's ever covered. The news doesn't cover us unless they want to cover something negative. But there's nothing ever celebrated. There's no resilience celebrated. And so it's important for us to get behind all of that, write stories with different characters and show the diversity and the resilience and the incredible, beautiful culture that we come from. There's so many people that I meet, my age even, that say they've never had access to ceremony. They don't even know how to get started with it. They didn't even know it existed. And that's really sad. It means we've got so much work to do. Somebody had asked me, I think last year when I was doing an interview, and if you were to describe your whole body of work in your entire life, and I was like, whoa, that's who could answer that? But when I really sat and thought about it, it's like actually anything that I have made, any content that I've created myself, it's all been to eradicate racism, all of it. Like Older Than America, that was about residential school. You know, when I had the opportunity to make that film, it's like, what am I going to make? And this is my directing debut. I got to do it right or and go big or go home. And I have to do it right. So it was such high pressure. But I had flown home to Canada. In La La Land, I really got used to not dealing with the severe racism in your face every day. So I was really living in La La Land. I didn't, and I didn't have any tolerance anymore. So when I came back to Canada and that racism was in my face and I can see it everywhere, and it's just like, I don't have a tolerance for it anymore. And I could feel it in such a visceral level. The judgment and the ignorance, you have no clue why those people are homeless. You have no clue why those people are suffering with mental health issues. And so I need to educate them. I didn't know why my father was the way he was growing up until I was educated, and it was through story. Story is the most powerful tool in the world, and it shapes perception.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us that picture and your background, Georgie. So thankful that you're here to talk about this. I'm curious, for like movies and TV shows that you've seen kind of maybe more in like the mainstream studio Hollywood way. How have these movies portrayed Indigenous people in the past? Or how do you feel that they have? Do you feel like this relates to North American history and the marginalization of Indigenous people?
The stereotypes are perpetuated constantly. And you know what's sad is they're even perpetuated from some of our own community members. Yeah. And it's not a conscious thing. It's just, that's just the way it is, right? I was just talking to Cindy Blackstock this morning, and Cindy Blackstock is a hero in Canada and in the childcare system around the world. She's huge. And I was talking to her about something. She told me that there's 30 million children around the world, completely different levels that people that are not connected don't even know. And she said the one thing, though, is the stories of resilience. We have no idea what other children around the world are going through, but it's the collective energy, the resilience that we have to do. That's what's brilliant. So we need to tell stories of our resilience, of our strength, of how incredible we are.
Thank you so much, Georgina, for laying this out for us. Let's chat about how movies and TV shows has portrayed Indigenous people in the past. Do you feel like this also relates to North American history and the marginalization of Indigenous people?
1,000%. Absolutely. Story is the most powerful tool in the world. And so we have not been the authors of our narrative, the history books, and then all into Hollywood for the last maybe 100 years, because Dances with Wolves actually was the first positive portrayal. And it actually it shifted. There's two sides of the coin on that film. There's people who loved it and people who did not love it. And to me, I loved it because it shifted the attitude towards us. That's the power of it. With a Kevin Costner mega films, and some people actually have seen it 100 times. It's in their library. They watch it constantly, and they get to see incredible characters. Graham Greens, Wes Studi, Monty Bass, Steve Rivas. A lot of my friends had incredible roles on there, and it really actually made their careers. It began their careers. Steve Rivas never had even a resume before that. And so it really boosted everything for the legions of men that got to participate in that film. And then the Ted Turner things continued after that. And so there was more work for the men and the children. And then Smoke Signals came along. Chris Eyre did Smoke Signals, which was the first time that an Indigenous independent filmmaker got any kind of accolade for a film. He did Smoke Signals, and it was the Jury's Choice Award, I believe, and it got distribution. I mean, it was a big success for us. We can do it. We can tell our own stories, and we can do it well.
Curious at the experience. What was the experience like when Smoke Signals came out, when Dances with Wolves came out? What was it like for you as a younger artist and as an Indigenous person to see those films and those portrayals and to see the work that it created for some of your friends and colleagues? Can you just speak to what that moment was like and how did it feel in that time?
it was exciting. Lauren, I met a lot of people at the premiere of Dances with Wolves. Even there's an organization called American Indians in Film. Even before I went to Hollywood, we were all part of this organization. So it was Wes Studi, Kimberly Norris, so many actors. And then I actually met them face to face during that premiere. I just arrived in Hollywood and got to see that. I thought, it actually filled me with so much pride. I was excited. We get to see really incredible characters with Dances with Wolves, better than I'd ever seen in my life. That was the best portrayal of Indigenous people. I thought the trajectory was going to continue going up, but it didn't. So we had to jump in there ourselves and make it happen for ourselves. And that's good. It's better.
How do you feel like it was before Dances with Wolves? Like, what was the portrayal before that?
Well, any media coverage we have is like the drunken, broken Indian. It's always our trauma afflictions that we're dealing with. There was never any kind of victorious thing. Even to this day in LA, whole entire community sees each other in the spring. Anything leathers and feathers is going to be shot, or Thanksgiving. We've all done the Turkey Day Guilt series episode. I did West Wing, Roseanne Barr. I think Charlie Hill did that one. Like, a lot of us have done the Thanksgiving things, but that's it. That's the only time we'd ever get any kind of calls for anything on television. There was no such thing as pilot season for us. That didn't exist. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to create our own stuff. We need more people getting behind content creation. We need private equity. We need to build our own empire. And it's not rocket science. We could do it ourselves. Our company has a whole slate of projects, putting everything together. And now that I'm on the Canadian side of the border, the government funds it here. It's like the UK. In Canada, there's government funding agencies to make films here.
Yeah.
I'm learning all of that. My son made his feature. It was named one of the top 10 films in Canada last year. And now he just got funding for his second film. My daughter, they wrote a musical and they just signed a 2-month deal in New York. So there's going to be natives off Broadway. So, and it's 100% Indigenous, written, created, produced, and all the cast. So we're making strides. And in Canada, we have Indigenous Screen Office, which actually just got handed the envelope from Canadian Media Fund, which is our largest funding agency in the country. They just handed the Indigenous envelope to Indigenous Screen Office to manage that money. So now it's going to be Indigenous people gauging who should be funded instead of non-Indigenous people. So that was a huge victory to hear that announcement. That was at Banff World Media Festival this summer.
Yeah.
We just heard that. So it's huge for us.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Also, another thing, the CRTC in Canada, they just approved for APTN to have a new channel, and it's 100% Indigenous language. So now with that, we can get more funding to make actual Indigenous content.
Oh, wow.
That's in our language. So it's huge on the Canadian side.
That is huge. That's beautiful.
I have a question, and I was just curious, going back to this realization that you've had about the power of storytelling, and you've spoken about, how powerful a tool that you think it is. I'm curious as to when that realization first began for you. Was that as a young person? Was it an emerging art career? But curious as to how you really realized what storytelling could do and how it could help shape the imagery.
Well, I love that you asked that question, because I was 6 years old when I first realized that what I was watching on the television had power. And I thought it was the people on the screen that were moving my dad, right? Making him emotional. So I thought it was the actors. So that's why I gravitated towards acting my entire life, until I was actually in repertory theater, when we were doing play after play after play. And I was the lead ingenue. So I had played some of the best roles ever written for women. But some of them, it's just like, I was not getting anything. My soul was not being fed by these roles. And then I did Sam Shepard's A Lie of the Mind. I played Beth, the lead in that. And it changed my whole trajectory from that moment on. That role and that story, it changed everything. I questioned everything that I had done up to that point. It's like, wow, the important message in it mattered, and it was real, and it was based on truth. And I resonated personally with it, and I loved it. To this day, I think that's the favorite role that I've ever played in my whole life. Sam Shepard's A Lie of the Mind. And that's when I knew it's not the actors, it's the story. It's the story that I'm addicted to. Those powerful stories about important subjects. A Lie of the Mind happened to be about domestic violence. So there was this actress, if you know Sam Shepard's play, when she went out to go do any work, her husband was jealous and he beat her so bad she had brain damage. And I never got the backstory on where Sam got that from, Sam Shepard, but he was one of my heroes. But playing that role about domestic violence, because that was prevalent in my life. That was real. Like I could connect on a visceral level and I loved it. I got so much out of that. And so that was the realization, wow, it is the story. It has nothing to do with being an actor. Of course, playing that role, yes. But I really haven't had any real moments like that until I was in a TV series called Blackstone, season 2. So I call her Trainwreck Tracy. So I got to play a multi-leveled I gave her PTSD and bipolar disorder is what I gave her.
Oh, wow.
She was a hardcore alcoholic, and I got to play all over the place and make the audiences fall in love with her. Everybody enjoyed her, even though she was broken. I got to really sink my teeth in there, and the director allowed me to improv. I mean, it was probably the most rewarding as far as being on camera that I had ever done in a sequence like that. So on stage, it was Sam Shepard's A Lie of the Mind, and on camera, it was Blackstone.
Yeah.
That for me.
Love that.
Yeah. And again, it's the stories, right? Blackstone was about a reservation and all the dysfunctions that happen in Indian country. My character actually ended up getting into a truck at the end, and she became an MMIW victim.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know? So it was multi-layered. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I wanted to turn this over to the present.
Okay.
How do you feel the current landscape of Indigenous filmmaking is like today? I haven't seen Fancy Dance yet, but I really want to. You know, and I feel like there are some authentic storytelling in your community being recognized as of late. It's obviously not at the level that we would like it to be, but it is starting to probably happen is what I'm perceiving. But how do you feel it is? What's your perception of how it can be and how it's like right now?
It was a way too slow coming, but it's here. And the fact that I'm actually experiencing, being able to witness the evolution and the transformation that's happening in the industry with Indigenous storytelling, I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. So I'm excited about where film is going. With Res Dogs, I love Res Dogs. I love Sterling Harjo. I love his whole team, Ryan and Bobby and Steve, Paul Judd. I love that whole team. I'm so excited for the Emmys. I don't watch those awards just because why? But I'm watching this year. I'm going to watch the Emmys and I'm crossing my fingers. I remember when I first saw the first season of Res Dogs and I text Sterling and I said, dude, you're going to receive an Emmy. You're getting it. And it was like, he was shy about it, but he's going to get that Emmy. I swear to God, the best comedy or what, I don't know what it's going to be, but I hope they get all 4. That would be incredible. He's already made history anyways, because he's the first one that got to make content that was with FX channel and they gave him free creative reign. I mean, that doesn't happen. And that was because of Taika. Taika walked in with Sterling. They got his show greenlit because Sterling was frustrated with the industry just like I was. Like I had taken some time off and just was helping my kids raise my grandchildren. The best role I've ever done in my whole life is being a cook. I just enjoyed it. Now my grandkids are ready to go to school, grade 1 and kindergarten. So I'm going to hit the ground running. And I feel like it's possible now. I have a 10-year agenda. I've had a meeting with my family. It's like, here, this is what we're going to do. But, you know, I've had more auditions in this last 2 years than I have in my whole life. My son, Cody, was in a Marvel show called Echo. That was huge.
Yeah.
There's groundbreaking stuff that's happening. It's so exciting. And that's just this last 5 years. It used to be, one person you'd hear in the whole continent that's making a movie.
Right.
Now there's 2 at a time. I just read the release of Telefilm. They used 23 million and funded 13 films, and one of them is Indigenous. And that's not in the Indigenous stream. That's in the regular stream. And so that's a huge victory too, because usually we have to apply to the Indigenous stream, which is a very small pocket of money, and that's for the whole country to fight over. So the fact that they were able to apply for that money as a human being and not as an Indigenous person was huge. And they got funded. I'm so excited for them. So things are changing. They're actually allowing us to be consulting in the process of funding. So I was in the committee for Telefilm. Like, what is authentic storytelling? What is real authentic storytelling? What's the definition of it? examples of authentic storytelling, all that kind of stuff. So they're changing the landscape. So now you can't just be a pretendian and go get money for Indigenous content anymore. They won't allow it. They're making regulations that protect and respect us, it's huge.
That is huge.
It's giant.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have like a lot of colleagues that you speak to about this kind of stuff? What are some of the things that you guys talk about in terms of like maybe solving longer term issues or things like that?
I lived in LA and all of us were disenfranchised from our family. So we became family.
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of time with my family members, or I'll go visit. Like I went to Santa Fe and I went and visit Chris Eyre and Zahn McLarnin's the lead actor in that series, to go hang out with those guys for a day. And I was so emotional. And Chucky's I call Chris Eyre Chucky's. Chucky looked at me, goes, "Oh, Georgie, what's going on?" I said, "Dude, you don't even realize how huge. Do you realize how huge this is? This is the regular budget for a series, season 3. You got an Indigenous lead, Zahn, and then Danny just walked in here. Danny's a stunt guy.
Mm-hmm.
Danny Edmo. He's a Montana Coda Indian. And I said, look at Danny just came in here talking to you about what stunt he's going to do. And it's an Indigenous guy who's going to do the car wreck. I just felt like we're here. That series, we're here. We've got stunt coordinator. We've got the guy doing Lucas Hogue. He's a Navajo and he's doing the stunt. I think that's probably the very first car wreck that an Indigenous stunt guy has ever done in the history of filmmaking. It was huge that day that I spent in Santa Fe with the boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got emotional because it was the first time ever. We're making waves in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's our time and it's about time.
Absolutely.
Media allows us to advance socially, politically, and economically. So I've been telling people forever, like, we've got to get more involved in media because media is power.
Yeah.
The wealthiest people in the country, they both have shares in media companies. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's power. And it's not just about finance. It's about socially, being socially accepted and a part of the fabric of the country.
Absolutely.
Is to have a voice in that, to share in the platforms that we have that are educating and shaping the minds of this new generation.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I like what you said about that, because I think, people don't really realize like how much influence media and TV and film, even the news or whatever, it can really affect people's perceptions of how things are like.
1,000%.
Yeah. And so like to be able to give an Indigenous filmmaker the proper amount of money for a film, not just be like, this is our charity project, right? Or like, this is the one thing that we're just doing to show that we're cool. Like, people have to really put their money where their mouth is. And I think that, I really hope that we get more Indigenous stories in the mainstream. Absolutely. That is more powerful to get people to understand your community more than just the random stereotypes that they've seen on TV previously, Yeah. But it is happening. Again, like you said, it is your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's exciting because my kids are going to benefit,
Yeah.
They're coming into that place where they're excited about being storytellers. They were actors before. Now they're coming up with their own stories. So it's perfect timing for them.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have planned.
Yeah. Well, Crystal will be co-directing this next feature with me. It's called Salesman of the Year.
Oh, cool.
And she's going to be co-directing. So she's been directing for stage with her musical Bear Grease. And that's been a huge success for 2 years. But now I asked her to co-direct this feature.
Oh, wow.
She said, no, I'm too intimidated. And I had to point out the incredible accomplishments. Look at what you've done.
Yeah.
I mean, you took people who are non-actors and you made them into staged musical performers that are traveling around the country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's wonderful that you're encouraging her to do that.
Oh, always.
And it's a good time, like I feel like there's a bit of momentum, and I feel like people are finally really recognizing the importance of these stories, and also for female storytellers to tell your side as well, I think will be really wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to get to some of our last questions, which is, we always have this call to action section of our podcast, which is, what do you feel are solutions and ideas for change? We love to leave this podcast, the listeners, with an action plan, whether people with willpower, or maybe there's people on the local level. What do you feel like are actionable things that people can do moving forward?
In Alberta, for example, oil is the big economy here. Some people people have tourism, whatever. We have to turn story into a resource. Story has to become a resource that we get behind for economy, and we can build economies anywhere. Hollywood does not have to be the controller and owner of everything.
Mhm.
Right now, they still hold such a giant power in what gets made and what doesn't. We've got to take power back. We have a responsibility to our culture, to our children, to continue telling our story. So we just have to take that power back. And we have to get behind content creators. Anybody and everybody get behind content creators
Mhm.
and encourage them to be storytellers. Everyone has a story. I don't care who you are. Everyone has a story in them. When somebody's talking about the possibility of maybe writing a story, get behind them 100%.
Mhm.
Our community is pretty broken. There's a lot of lateral violence. And, I was never supported to be a actor or a filmmaker or to go to Hollywood. And I'm
Mhm.
so glad I did. My life is what it is because I made those choices. And I'll
Mhm.
never look back. Like, I've never regretted any of it.
Yeah. You had to fight the good fight. You had to fight for the thing that you wanted
Absolutely.
versus being encouraged by the general community, which is so difficult, but shows a lot of character, right? And that's part of your storytelling in many ways, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's impacted my children in a way that there's nothing that I've done that has changed the successes and the victories of my children. My son did that movie on his own. My daughter did Bear Grease on her own. They've accomplished these on their own. But I think just showing an example of fearlessness,
Mhm.
there was any kind of gift that I was able to give them, it was fearlessness. If I can make a movie, anybody can,
Yeah.
because it's not rocket science.
Mhm.
And then if they have the idea, let's get behind you 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your generation within the Indigenous community is different from, let's say, your children's generation in the
absolutely.
way that they even move through the world, make films, even how they perceive themselves as filmmakers? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
In my day,
Mhm.
there was not even cell phones. There
Mhm.
wasn't no cell phones. There was no social media. We didn't have the power that the younger generation have now. We don't have to go get 35 millimeter budgets that require such expensive equipment and filming techniques. We can go buy a video camera for $5,000 and make a movie.
Mhm.
Black Horse Low is one of my heroes. Why? Because Michelle Svensson's the American Indian Festival
Mhm.
over in New York. Black Horse Low showed his film. He's a Navajo, and he made that independent film on his own in his own community with zero budget. He said at the end of the day, it cost him about $5,000. He made a full length feature film. Now, it wasn't fancy, but it was a story that he told. He edited it, he shot it himself. He showed with that one camera, he had enough power to tell a whole story. Traveled all over the world with that.
Mhm.
Like, it opened so many doors because who can do that?
Mhm.
Who can take a video camera and make a whole movie with a budget of $5,000? That's a certain skill all in its own. And
Mhm.
just thought that was incredible. And now we have cell phones. You can make movies. One of our Bear Grease kids, Nippy, I shouldn't say kids, she's like in her late 30s, but she's a kid to me. She's one of those TikTok people that got a bunch of equipment sent to her door because she makes incredible videos. And I go,
Mm.
wow, she's a future storyteller. She
Yeah.
did a Story Hive workshop and she made her first short film. And now she's just asked me, Georgie, if there's anything I could do. Absolutely. I am going to put her to work. There's so much power now because of social media. They can't keep us out.
Right.
Anybody can open a YouTube account and anybody can take their cell phone and make a movie and tell a story. I was a professor at Santa Fe University at film school,
Mhm.
and I had international students and some from third world countries where there's war. And I said, that cell phone gives you guys power. You can actually let the world know what's going on. Before,
Yeah.
the media got to brainwash us into thinking everything was fine when really the most atrocious things were happening in the world. And now you guys have the power. You can take that cell phone, you can let the world know what's happening all the time.
Mhm.
Like, there's so much power in it. And it doesn't cost a fortune. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Minimal amounts now. Doesn't cost insane amounts of money.
Yeah. Even in the cultural zeitgeist, I feel like people's interest is different. The audiences are opening up to different types of stories and they're eager.
Yeah.
At least that's maybe my perception, but I feel like generationally, like people 2 generations ago maybe weren't as interested in seeing different types of stories,
Absolutely.
maybe not as open to it. And now I feel like we have a lot more people who are much more open culturally,
Mhm.
which is, I think, a positive thing.
Huge. So Netflix,
Hmm.
they changed the entire platform of media because Hollywood was the power. And they
Mhm.
knew they ran the show. They monopolized everything. They ran the show. And California is one of the wealthiest states in the world. It's wealthier than most G8 countries, Russia, Italy, all that. And that's based on media.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew they had that power. But when Netflix started that streaming service, and they took a lot of the power away from Hollywood, and it forced Hollywood to change their landscape. And then you had Amazon, then you have FX, just this whole entire different way of distributing films came about. And then it took a lot of the power away from Hollywood. So it disseminated a lot. And Netflix went into countries all over the world. I've been exposed to more cultural movies, and I watch subtitle movies because of Netflix. So there wasn't a way that we could see all these incredible stories. Disney, they stole from the Welsh. Those are brilliant storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
The South African Film Festival, like I get to see that because of YouTube. I get to watch some of those films, and the stories are so beautiful. Without even seeing it, just the visuals are incredible. It's so amazing what it is. I think it's eradicating racism. I think racism comes from complete ignorance. Whatever information you have is what you gauge your opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's stereotypical ignorance and it's shaped from a negative point of view, that's what the audience is going to believe in you, because they're influenced by media.
Absolutely.
They're 100% influenced. We had a passing, one of our young boys who was an up and coming, just an incredible trajectory of his career. He just got cast as a lead in a feature. The next day, he was going to be doing chemistry reads, and he was murdered. His body was left outside of Haskell Indian School. The way the media painted it, it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. And to this day, there's been no investigation into the murderers, and they're calling it a suicide. And yet there's so much evidence that shows otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people who are highly intelligent, a lawyer friend of mine that texts me, goes, "Oh, Georgina, it's really sad that he had all this I said, "Where are you getting this opinion from, Catherine?" She goes, "I read about it." I said, "Shame on you. That is not true. None of that's true. Oh my gosh." And it really upset me. You know, this is somebody's life. And he was just ready to get his degree. He was working and paid for his own education at a high-end burger place. He was an actor. He was a model. Like you'd see him in Santa Fe at the couture fashion shows modeling. Like he was a really incredible, beautiful person. He comes from a Sundance traditional ceremony family. And the picture they painted was some drunken kid who was running off on a domestic violence. The girl that accused him wasn't even going out with him. I mean, it was just insane. The circus brings plenty. That's his nephew. Mo Brings Plenty is the native guy on Yellowstone. And it's his nephew, you know, that was murdered. So he's trying with everything that he can to see if somebody can just please shed some light, because that area is known as the birthplace of KKK.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to investigate the non-Indigenous people that murdered this Indian boy.
Right. Right.
You know, with braids. Yeah, he was so Indian. It was horrible. But the media shaped it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think what you're shedding on is that there's so much work to do, so much more, and hope people can investigate things in like a much more, besides just reading it, right? Or even talking to people, just even hearing you talk about it is, you know, illuminating for me to hear that some of these stories get twisted by the wrong people, right? So that's the issue.
Yeah. And as an Indigenous people, we don't own any media outlets.
Right.
We don't own a channel where we can inform people on our own. So we're beholden to very right wing and left wing. You know, there's two sides of the coin always, but none of them are pro-Indigenous.
Right.
They're not going to tell our side.
The real story. Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until we get in control.
Yeah. Well, that's why I am so grateful that you came onto the show. Do you have any last minute philosophical musings? We always like to end with an inspiring thought on this topic.
If you're an Indigenous person listening to this, storytelling is in your DNA. So just allow yourself to get a story out of you. Everybody has a story in you, and I want to hear it. I want to watch it.
Lovely. Yes, lovely. Yay. Thank you so much, Georgina. Our website is filmphilosophy.com. That's film and then philosophy with an F.com. We have educational resources on there, and we also have a contact info in case listeners, you want to ask questions and follow up. Our email is filmphilosophy.tme@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. We had so much fun with this topic that we kept talking after we wrapped the episode. Please enjoy some bonus content from our chat. You can find it on our website, filmphilosophy.com. Again, that is film and then philosophy with an F.com. We also have an Instagram where you can find us at film.philosophy. This is Film Philosophy, and we'll see you next time.